Hey guys, tonight we slip into something a little less comfortable, about 30 pounds of hardened leather. Iron plates, silk cords, and a helmet so tight it leaves a mark. Yes, we're talking about samurai armor. And yes, you're wearing it. You're leaning back against the painted wood of a quiet temple wall somewhere in feudal Japan. Your knees ache, your back is stiff, and your helmet strap is digging into your chin, but none of that matters right now, because you're asleep. Sound asleep. In full gear, the cicadas chirp. Somewhere in the distance, a bamboo fountain clacks as it fills and tips over and over again. And you're snoring softly through a slitted mask meant for war. You probably won't survive this century, to be honest. Between the civil wars, political betrayals, and dietary scarcities, there's no guarantee you'll even make it to 30. But for now, you're tucked into your metal cocoon, drifting off like a battle-hardened butterfly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The clank of armor isn't usually associated with sleep, but here, in this quiet grove, the temple guards don't seem too concerned. One is snoozing beside you, his head slumped forward. His sword, still sheathed, leans gently on his shoulder like a sleepy pet. There's no mattress, no blanket, not even a straw mat, just wooden decking and the rustle of wind in the pine trees. And yet it works. The truth is, samurai naps weren't always a luxury. They were a necessity, sneaked into whatever quiet moment one could find. If you imagine a warrior who only rested once, he'd hung up his armor. Think again. Armor stayed on, and the naps still happened. That's how battles were survived, and why we're starting our story here somewhere between vigilance and vulnerability. Iron and exhaustion. You let your eyes flutter open briefly. A fox darts past the temple gate. You blink once, then again, and settle back into the doze. Your body has accepted the weight. The straps and plates press you down in a way that feels weirdly secure, like a stone blanket. Historians still argue whether this behavior, napping fully armed, was ritual, routine, or desperation. Some believe it symbolized discipline. Others suggest it was a practical habit born of endless warfare and erratic hours. A samurai might have no idea when the next ambush was coming, only that it would come. So, better to rest with one hand on your scabbard and your armor still strapped tight. Of course, it helped that armor wasn't quite the medieval torture device we picture. Traditional Japanese armor, or gigoroi, was often lighter and more flexible than the European equivalent. Iron or leather plates were laced together with silk cords, creating something more like a rugged exoskeleton than a rigid cage. It creaked. It smelled, but once you got used to it, you could do anything in it. Eat, ride, pray, and yes, sleep. Sometimes you slept where you stood. There's a story, half legend, half logbook, of a scout who napped upright with his head tucked under his arm, leaning into a tree for balance. His commander found him hours later and commended him for resting efficiently. Another tale, more amusing than inspiring, tells of a foot soldier who fell asleep while crouched beside a stream. When he woke up, his helmet was filled with frogs. Whether that one's true is anyone's guess. But you're starting to see the picture. Naps weren't sacred or even scheduled. They were simply survival. There's a strange calm that comes with this kind of exhaustion. You're too tired to feel afraid. Your thoughts drift like fallen leaves. You're aware of the weight of your armor, the slow rise and fall of your breath, the way your fingers twitch slightly around your weapon. It's all muscle memory now. Nearby, another soldier snores, high-pitched and nasal. No one scolds him. You've all been there sometimes. Dreams come. And when they do, they're vivid. You dream of plum blossoms falling like snow. You dream of lost swords, forgotten vows, childhood haiku. You dream of a duel you haven't yet fought, and in the dream, you win, just barely. What is it about danger that sharpens dreams? Maybe it's because sleep in armor is never fully restful. Your body's in two worlds at once. One foot in the safety of sleep, the other in the readiness of war. You never fully let go. You just float. The sun begins to set. A distant drumbeat signals the changing of the watch. You stir slightly, crack your knuckles through the silk of your glove, and shift your weight. But you don't rise yet. You've still got 10 minutes of rest before the next command. 10 more minutes of warmth and silence. 10 more minutes of being alone with your breath, your armor, your thoughts. Not bad for a nap on a wooden floor. Asterisk the armor you're wearing right now has a name to say gusuka and, while it clanks and clatters like a walking toolbox, it's more flexible than it looks. That's because it isn't made from one big sheet of metal like a knight's breastplate. It's more like wearable origami, hundreds of small iron and leather plates, stitched and laced together with dyed silk cords. The result is something that bends with you, sighs with you, and after enough use, almost molds to your shape like an old hoodie, except much heavier. Underneath, you're wrapped in layers. A padded underrobe called a shitage keeps the armor from rubbing your skin raw. Over that, a tighter cassode, then the armor proper starting with a belly wrap called a do. Shoulder guards, forearm sleeves, thigh plates, shin guards, a neck protector, and, of course, the kabuto, your helmet, crowned with a crest no less flamboyant than a small antlered deer or a golden crescent moon. At a glance you might assume this all made sleeping impossible, but then you've never truly felt the odd security that comes from being pressed in on all sides, like a full body hug that smells faintly of oiled leather and old sweat. Some warriors even said they preferred sleeping armored. It made them feel less vulnerable. Others simply had no choice. You can't really take off 30 pounds of gear and put it back on quickly in the dark. So often, it stayed on. Historians still debate how often samurai removed their armor, especially during prolonged campaigns. Some argue it was common to strip down in safe zones. Others believe it stayed on for days at a time, with only minor adjustments for cleaning or adjusting pressure points. A few texts even describe samurai adjusting the cords in their sleep tightening, here loosening therewith without fully waking. And no, armor wasn't uniform. You could often tell a man's rank or wealth from the armor's detail. Higher-ranking samurai had armor decorated with lacquered plates, embroidered silk ties, and tiny family crests carved into shoulder flaps. Lower-ranking foot soldiers, called ashigaru, got the scratchy, splintery end of the deal, stiff, patched gear that chafed and barely fit. But the odd thing, the poorer armor sometimes made for better sleep. Less decoration, less metal, fewer sharp protrusions. A tired ashigaru could curl up beside a tree and nap like a sack of potatoes, while a well-decorated officer had to sleep gingerly, lest he poke himself in the face with his own ceremonial crest. The armor wasn't just about protection, either. It was a statement, a moving resume, a symbol of your clan, your ancestry, your personal taste in intimidating shoulder flare. One samurai, famously wore bright red armor lacquered so heavily that it shone in sunlight. Not exactly subtle, and probably not comfortable for napping, unless you enjoy being your own heat lamp. But even the flashiest sets of armor had a surprisingly thoughtful design. Inside, you might find tiny cushions sewn into high-friction spots, bits of rabbit fur near the neck, or even soft leather at the joints. Some warriors carried extra padding to stuff under their shoulder guards when resting. These weren't luxuries, they were the difference between a nap and a neck cramp that could cost you your life in the next skirmish. 1. 16th century record tells of a group of samurai who were ambushed at night and managed to fight back within minutes because they had never taken off their gear. They had simply propped themselves against logs, leaned into the weight, and fallen asleep like statues. The enemy thought they were already dead. Turns out they were just tired. A kind of intimacy to the way a samurai wore his armor. Not just the physical closeness, but the relationship built over time. A warrior would patch and mend his own gear, sometimes for years. The cords would darken with sweat and dirt. The leather would soften in the spots his elbows bent most. Like a favorite pair of boots saw, that one hoodie you won't throw out because it knows your shape better than you do. Armor even had a smell, a real one. Some samurai used camellia oil to prevent rust. Others burned incense inside the layers to mask the sweat. You might detect hints of sandalwood, charcoal, dried sweat, and yes, the earthy tang of lacquer that never quite fades. It's not unpleasant, just distinct. And for the samurai who wore it daily, it became oddly comforting. Like the scent of your own home. Familiar, reassuring, nap-inducing even. There's a travel journal written by a Buddhist monk who once accompanied a small war party. He wrote, "They doze in iron coats, as monks do in robes, content as oxen." He wasn't mocking them. He was marveling at their ability to rest inside the very things designed for war. And that's what you're doing now. You're lying on your side, cheek resting against your arm guard, knees bent, the plates shifting gently as you breathe. The air is thick with pine and wood smoke. A horse rustles nearby. One of your comrades hums a soft tune, off-key, barely audible over the crickets. You're not worried about being attacked, not right now. You've tied a thin rope around your wrist, the other end looped around your sword hilt. If someone tries to take it, you'll wake. Or maybe you won't, but it comforts you just the same. Sleep comes quickly in armor when the body is used to it, and yours is asterisk. It's strange how stillness finds its place, even in the middle of war. One moment, you're ducking arrows, the next, you're slumped against a wall, nodding off in full gear. That's not bravery, it's just biology. At some point, the body demands rest. And for samurai on campaign, the in-between moments, those little silences before or after a battle became prime. Napping territory, pictured this. The battlefield is quiet for now. The archers have stopped. The war drums are silent. You and your unit have been marching since dawn, and no one's sure if the enemy is retreating or regrouping. So your commander does something completely ordinary. He waves a hand and says, "Rest while you can." That's not just advice, that's an order. You sit, your knees creak. The ground is damp, but you're too tired to care. You lean back against a tree, tuck your sword in close, and let your helmet tilt forward just enough to block the sun. It's not a nap in the peaceful sense, it's a pause in motion. A breath before the next strike. Historians still argue whether these battlefield naps were common or rare. Some military chronicles describe them as standard practice. Others claim only the bold or foolish would risk closing their eyes in enemy territory. But again and again, you find clues in old records, notes scribbled in war journals, jokes in camp songs, even illustrations in folding screens that show warriors curled up under pine trees, helmets tipped forward like sleepy turtles. And it wasn't just the exhausted foot soldiers. High-ranking commanders, too, would grab rest whenever possible. There's a story about the famed General Wasugi Kenshin, who, after 3 days of skirmishes, was found sleeping, sitting up in his armor, head bowed over a wooden writing table. His attendants were so afraid to wake him that they built a tent around him rather than disturb his rest. He eventually woke up when it started to rain inside the tent. That story might be embellished, but it reflects something deeper about the samurai lifestyle. Fatigue was part of the job, and you didn't always have the luxury of removing your armor to deal with it. Oddly enough, the armor itself helped. Sure, it wasn't plush, but it created a kind of rigid structure around your body that acted like scaffolding. Your limbs stayed in place. Your back remained mostly straight. You couldn't exactly toss and turn, which meant you didn't. Your body adjusted. It learned to rest within limits. You weren't sleeping on clouds, but you were conserving energy. And in feudal Japan, that was more precious than comfort. Food was scarce on the road. Travel was slow. Soldiers often marched for hours through muddy roads and misty forests, eating salted rice balls and wild greens plucked from the path. By the time you reached camp, even a quick nap felt like heaven, if it was taken with your chest plate still fastened tight. A fringe detail often ignored is how group dynamics played into these moments. You were rarely alone. Samurai often rested in small clusters, backs to one another like a human wall. That way, if one person stirred, the others would wake too. You might not feel safe enough to fall asleep alone, but surrounded by your unit, armor still on. You let yourself drift. Sometimes there was even a kind of rhythm to it. A soldier across from you hums a lullaby, something his mother used to sing. Another scrapes his boot clean with a stick, a slow, repetitive sound like sandpaper. A third sharpens his blade softly, the metallic whisper of stone against steel. These tiny sounds become background music, oddly soothing. You fall asleep to the symphony of survival. And then, of course, there's the weather. It changes everything. Rain, miserable. The silk cords of your armor soak through, stretch, and take forever to dry. The metal sticks to your skin and chills your bones. You nap anyway. Snow, not as bad as you'd think. Snow dampens sound, creates insulation, even if your nose turns red and your toes go numb. You tuck your fingers inside your sleeves, lean into a snow-covered log, and pretend you're somewhere warmer, summer heat, though that's the real enemy. Armor becomes an oven. Sweat pools in uncomfortable places. Your scalp itches under your helmet, and the lacquered surface of your gear turns sticky, napping in that torture. But again, you do it. You find a shaded spot, dig a shallow groove into the earth, and let the cool dirt soothe your spine. Samurai napping habits weren't just biological, they were strategic. If you didn't rest when you could, you wouldn't perform when needed. And there's a kind of discipline in allowing yourself a nap at the right moment. It says, I've done what I can. I'm ready when called. That kind of confidence can be as intimidating as any sword. And don't be fooled, some naps were tactical. A samurai might fake sleep to lull a rival into thinking they were off guard. There's even an old saying, even in dreams, the warrior listens. Whether it's metaphor or instruction, the meaning's clear. Rest, but never fully. Back in your present moment, you stir. A pinecone rolls under your boot. Someone coughs. The shadows are shifting. You stretch slightly, the cords of your armor creaking like a worn-out screen door. You're still tired, but the nap helped. Enough to move. Enough to fight again, if needed. And that's the secret, really. Samurai didn't nap in armor because it was comfortable. They did it because they had to, and they trained their bodies to treat discomfort like background noise. You wipe your brow, adjust your sash, and stand ready for whatever comes next. Asterisk, you're not highborn, you're not a general, you don't have a silk pillow embroidered with your family crest, or a personal attendant to remove your greaves when you're sleepy. But you're lucky you serve under a daimyo who understands the value of rest. He's not just a warlord. He's something of a connoisseur of naps. His camp is run like a small kingdom, with a strict hierarchy, not just for battle formations, but for sleeping schedules. You watch him sometimes after morning drills. He retreats into his tent, removes only his helmet, and lies down for precisely 30 minutes. No more, no less. Then he re-emerges with the serenity of a man who's never known anxiety. Samurai culture, for all its rigidity, had room for rhythms especially when it came to balancing alertness and fatigue. Within a typical feudal estate, naps weren't always associated with laziness. In fact, for the higher classes, structured rest was a sign of discipline. Sloppy men slept too much, but well-timed, efficient napping, that was the mark of someone who mastered his body and mind. You stretch out in the dirt thinking of that. How odd that someone in lacquered armor and silk robes could be so methodical about sleep. But then, in a world where death could arrive mid-meal, mid-bath, or mid-sentence, controlling when and how you rested was one of the few powers you had. In your daimyo's estate, napping had its rules. Foot soldiers weren't allowed to sleep before the fourth bell, unless on shift rotation. Sentries slept in staggered groups, so the walls were always watched. And during peacetime, afternoon rest was encouraged provided you could wake within 3 heartbeats of a shouted name. One late riser reportedly trained himself by tying a string to his wrist that snapped taut when someone tugged it from across the room. Historians still argue whether this type of nap discipline came from Confucian ideals or simply centuries of trial and error. But scrolls and diaries from the Sengoku period describe napping regimens with surprising regularity. To sleep like a soldier is to dream with a blade, one 16th century proverb goes. You're not quite sure what that means, but it sounds nice as you drift off. Your tent mate grumbles beside you. His elbow digs into your ribs. He's younger, barely 16, and still hasn't learned how to rest quietly. He fidgets, scratches, hums to himself. You elbow him back. In camp, there's a strange intimacy to shared napping. You're not just lying next to strangers, surrendering your awareness near people who might have to save your life before sunset. There's no armor thicker than mutual exhaustion. Asterisk sometimes, your daimyo has visitors. Other warlords, Buddhist monks, artisans, even no actors. They sit around lacquered tables, sip powdered tea, and talk about land, poetry, or war. You've seen your master doze in the middle of these conversations, right there at the table, head bowed, eyes closed. The room respectfully quiet, not because he's rude, but because he can, because he trusts his surroundings and his body. That kind of sleep is powerful. It's also strategic. One scroll you read well, glanced at, while pretending to sweep outlined something called sleep posture as performance. Basically, how you nap said something about you. If you reclined fully, you were comfortable in your power. If you sat upright, you signaled vigilance. Some samurai deliberately napped cross-legged to show mental clarity, even while unconscious. That one's harder than it sounds. You've tried. There's a fringe account of a bamboo so obsessed with posture that he had a bamboo stool carved into the shape of a horse saddle so he could sleep as if still riding into battle. His attendants hated it. He loved it. Historians remain baffled. You stir and roll onto your side, armor plates clinking. You think of the daimyo, again, how he sips from a tiny ceramic cup, how he orders the entire camp to go silent at dusk, how even his naps seem choreographed. Sometimes he invites his senior warriors to meditate with him before battle, not to chant or pray but to sit quietly, breathing together, eyes closed, feeling the weight of their armor and the tension in the air. It lasts 10 minutes. Then everyone stands, calmer, sharper, ready. Is it a nap? Is it focus? Who knows? But it works. You've heard the younger soldiers grumble. How does he sleep so easily? But the answer's clear. It's not ease, it's effort. A lifetime of training the body to rest when allowed, to snap awake without confusion, to treat even 5 minutes of quiet as a sacred gift. It's not lazy, it's wardiness. You breathe out, long, slow. The cicadas are louder now. Someone nearby is sharpening a blade. You know it by the smooth scrape of metal over stone. But even that sound is rhythmic, predictable, almost comforting. And there, in your armor, covered in sweat and dust and silence, you let yourself drift again. Because if your daimyo can nap under a silk banner with enemies waiting over the ridge, then so can you on a straw mat, elbow deep in your neighbor's snoring. After all, battle is chaos. But sleep is strategy. You're half awake now, caught in that fuzzy middle place where dreams bleed into reality. The cool edge of your chest plate presses against your cheek. The scent of lacquer and damp grass fills your nose. You shift slightly, and the faint creak of leather cords adjusting brings you back into your body. It's not exactly a bed, but it's familiar and oddly comforting. You wouldn't think a suit of armor could provide a sense of peace, but here you are, wrapped in plates and padding, tucked like a sardine between two other equally exhausted samurai. One of them is drooling onto his sleeve. The other is muttering something about rice cakes. You don't ask what you're feeling right now. Is the strange sensation that samurai have whispered about for generations, the smell and feel of home inside your own armor. It doesn't just protect you in battle, it holds you like a shell holds a turtle, like a very creaky, mildly smelly, deeply personal exoskeleton. You've worn this armor for months. You've sweated into it. You've polished it, cursed at it, tightened and relaced it so many times you could do it blindfolded. Every scuff tells a story. That dent on your left knee, from tripping into a stone lantern during a night patrol. The frayed cord at your shoulder, chewed by a monkey you tried to feed once. Bad idea. Historians still debate whether armor was passed down or custom-made for each samurai. Some evidence suggests that elite warriors had their armor tailored, literally sculpted to their frame over years. Others reused family heirlooms, adjusting them as needed. Either way, over time, the armor became you, a kind of second skin with a memory of its own. And it didn't just fit you, it learned you. You began to sense where the cords would pinch, which corner to tuck under your elbow while resting, how to tilt your head so the helmet's inner rim didn't press into your temple. Little tricks, little comforts, learned over countless short naps between long marches. Some samurai even personalized the inside of their armor. They carved tiny phrases into the chestplate lining, bits of poetry, family names, prayers. You once peeked at a senior warrior's gear while he was out washing inside. The collar was stitched a simple phrase: sleep lightly, dream sharply. He wouldn't talk about it, but you saw him touch that spot every time before closing his eyes. It's no coincidence that so many samurai philosophies revolved around self-awareness. Knowing your armor inside and out wasn't just about combat. It was about readiness. The better you knew your gear, the faster you could slip into stillness. And when silence came, when the world held its breath between trumpet calls or morning drums, you could disappear into a kind of armored meditation. You adjust your back slightly. A pine needle has worked its way under your sash. You don't even need to look, you just reach and pluck it out by feel. That's what happens when you live inside something for months. You know every twitch, every seam, every creak across the camp. A few soldiers are playing a quiet game, something like chess, but with flat wooden tiles and an absurd number of rules. They're whispering and pointing, trying not to laugh. You watch them for a moment, then let your eyes close again. The noise isn't loud enough to disturb you. In fact, it makes you feel safer. That's the thing, there's a strange comfort in camp life. The predictability of it, the way the same sounds happen at the same times every day. Fire crackling, soup bubbling, armor shifting as someone stands up, boots crunching over gravel. You come to know these noises so well, you can sleep through them. And when you're wrapped in your gear, you're protected, not just from blades and arrows, but from the cold, the wet, the uncertainty. It's like a blanket that smells like hard work. Even the smell of the armor becomes nostalgic. Sweat, oil, rain, old tea, maybe even the faint ghost of smoke from a long-ago fire. It shouldn't be pleasant, but it is. You remember a story, half fact, half folklore, about a samurai who loved his armor so much that he refused to be buried without it. His final request was to be interred, fully dressed, helmet and all. The monks resisted, claiming it would interfere with his soul's passage, but his retainers insisted. The armor was part of him now. His grave still stands, and legend says you can hear the faint clink of metal in the wind if you pass by at night. Quirky stories like that stick with you, because even if you wouldn't go that far, you do get it. There's something intimate about the armor, something familiar. Maybe it's not just a tool, maybe it's a memory vessel, a reminder that you've survived dozens of battles, harsh winters, long marches, bitter losses, and in between, dozens of naps, just like this one. You exhale slowly, your breath steaming slightly in the cooling air. Your back relaxes. The straps at your side pull slightly as your chest expands. The helmet sits just right, today not too tight, not too loose. You can hear your own heartbeat inside the dome of it, soft, steady, like a drum in the distance. It's not home, but it's something close, and for now, that's enough. Asterisk, there's a chill in the morning air, the kind that makes your breath visible, even before the sun rises. You feel it in your fingers first, the way the cold seeps through the gloves and stiffens the joints. But you don't move yet, not because you're lazy, because you're listening, not for danger, for rhythm. The camp has its own pulse, and you learn to follow it. First comes the rustle of straw mats, then a cough, muffled, then the unmistakable clack of someone stirring the embers of the cooking fire. All around you, armor begins to stir, like beetles stretching under stones. One by one, your fellow warriors wake not with yawns and stretches like a peaceful village, but with careful precision. You sit up slowly, careful not to let your helmet clatter against the post behind you. Your shoulder aches slightly where it met the ground. That's normal, you'll walk it off. What matters is that you slept. Even just a bit. Even fully clothed in battle gear, with a pebble digging into your hip and the faint scent of pickled radish wafting from someone's supplies. This morning's task is patrol. You and 6 others will ride along the misty outskirts of the valley, eyes peeled for movement, but you're ready, you napped. It wasn't deep, it wasn't long, but it was enough. Enough to bring clarity back to your gaze and steadiness too. Your hands, and the funny thing, sleeping in armor has trained your body to wake in stages, like booting up a well-worn machine. First your fingers flex, then your neck turns, then you test your legs. Only when everything answers us still functional do you rise. This technique, this internal check-in, was actually taught, not formally, not in books, but passed down through observation. Young samurai learned it from their seniors, watching how they stirred from rest like cats from sunspots.com. Controlled, no jerky motions, no panic. That kind of self-possession, it's as much a weapon as your katana. Historians still argue whether these rising rituals were psychological, spiritual, or just practical. Some scrolls link them to Zen practice, starting the day with awareness of breath and body. Others insist it was sheer habit born from years of sleeping in gear. Either way, it worked, and when you stand, you feel taller. Not just because of the armor's weight, but because of the readiness it brings. You're strapped in, bound by dozens of hand-tied cords, and somehow that makes you feel freer, because you're prepared. Now imagine the contrast. Think of a soft futon, silk sheets, a warm fire and a padded robe. It sounds like paradise, but to a samurai, it might be dangerous, to relaxing, to disarming. Softness was for poets and pensioners. Warriors lived in tension. That tension of mind, muscle, and metal was part of the job. There's even a phrase from the old texts: a warrior does not sleep, he reposes. It's a subtle shift in language, but it says everything. You're not escaping into sleep like a villager after a long day in the fields. You're pausing, watching, letting your breath slow just enough to catch your balance again. And you weren't alone. In every camp, there were guards who never fully slept. They dozed in loops 10 minutes on 10 off, tied by rope to warning bells or sharp stones. If they nodded too deeply, they'd jerk awake. One group reportedly tied their pinkies together with thread. If one dozed too hard, it would tug the other. These weren't cruel practices, they were clever ones, because in a time without alarms, phones, or glow-in-the-dark clocks, staying alert required creativity. The line between sleep and death could be thinner than the fabric of your underrobe. Yet even with that pressure, most samurai did sleep. They just adapted. They treated armor not as an inconvenience, but as a sleeping condition, like a firm mattress, or a thunderstorm outside your window. You don't stop sleeping. You just learn to let it become background. One common method was the knee perch. You kneel, sit back on your heels, cross your arms, and lean your helmet forward until it rests on your own hands. It's uncomfortable at first, but over time, your spine adjusts. Your body memorizes the pose, and you learn to nap like a hawk in stillness, upright but unconscious, a fringe trick passed around. Larankan troops involve shaping a pile of spare sandals into a makeshift cushion. It smelled terrible, but it worked. Another oddity, folding fans weren't just for court etiquette. Carried by many samurai, they doubled as shade, status symbols, and sleeping aids. When tucked behind the neck, they supported the head in a half-reclined position. You've seen more than one samurai doze off, looking like he's meditating on the nature of wind, when really, he's just catching 10 blessed minutes of rest. You pull your helmet strap tighter. The patrol leader is whistling softly to himself, waiting. You flex your fingers in their leather gloves. No stiffness, no pins and needles, just readiness. And behind it all, that nap, that armor nap, that strange little moment of rest wrapped in steel and dust and muscle memory. Not peaceful, not luxurious, but effective, quiet, sacred. You mount your horse. The fog hangs low, silver over the fields and beneath your armor. Your body carries the echo of rest. Asterisk, you've been riding for hours now, the path winding through cedar groves and mislaced meadows, hooves thudding softly on damp earth. The rhythm of the journey has settled into your bones, left, right, breath, sway. And your armor, once stiff and clunky at sunrise, now moves with you like a second spine. You're not asleep, obviously, but you're close. That's the thing about samurai training. It turns even wakefulness into a kind of rest. You learn to ride with minimal tension, to let the armor carry some of your weight, to let your eyes half lit as the road stretches on. You might be alert in theory, but in practice, you're cruising on what might be described as combat autopilot. Behind you, your unit hums with the same energy. No one speaks unless needed. You all learned long ago that silence doesn't mean boredom, it means preservation. You're saving your breath, saving your thoughts, even saving your neck muscles, letting the weight of your helmet rest forward or back depending on the slope of the trail. One of the younger riders dozes, not fully just enough that his head nods with each step of the horse. You spot it, but you don't scold. You've done the same. Everyone has. It's part of the unspoken code. If no one's attacking and the captain hasn't called halt, a little saddles news is fair game. Historians still puzzle over how samurai managed this balance, how they stayed deadly while allowing themselves these microrests. Some theorize it came from Zen practice, learning to observe without effort, to let awareness flow like water. Others say it was purely physical bodies, trained so well they didn't need conscious guidance. Whatever the cause, the result was the same: a nap that wasn't a nap, a rest without lying down. And it wasn't just the body that needed these moments. The mind needed them more. Consider the constant tension of feudal Japan. Political betrayals, family rivalries, land disputes. Your lord might be planning peace talks in the morning and plotting a night raid by evening. You couldn't afford to let your thoughts run wild all the time. So instead, you compartmentalized. You let go by bit during rides like these. Even the horse beneath you feels it. She senses your calm, matches your rhythm. You and she are both wrapped in your own forms of armor, in boiled leather and ornamental cloth. You in iron and silk, and somehow, you both understand that this hour, this stretch of forest trail, is a shared reprieve. You breathe in the cool scent of moss and morning dew. You adjust your gloves. You feel a slight itch at the base of your neck, but resist the urge to scratch. The weight of your gear keeps you grounded, anchored, in some odd way. It's become your lullaby. You remember once reading or having someone read to you, more likely a scroll about soft focus. The idea that samurai were trained not just to look at things, but to sense them, to let their peripheral awareness widen and soften like ripples in water. That's what this feels like now. You're not staring at the path. You're part of it. There's a sound, a twig snapping, but it's a deer, not a scout. The horse doesn't flinch. Neither do you. Another mile passes, then two. A hawk circles overhead, casting a small shadow across your shoulder. You catch it, recognize it, then let it go. You're not chasing anything right now. You're simply continuing. And then, as the trail dips toward a shallow stream, the captain calls a brief halt. Horses lower their heads to drink. You dismount and stretch, slowly, carefully. Your knees protest, your back creaks, but you're grateful. This is the second kind of nap. The lean and drift nap. You find a tree. You slide down its trunk, until you're half sitting, half slouched. Your helmet clinks softly as it leans back against the bark. You rest your hands on your lap, fingers still gloved, still poised, and you breathe. You let the sounds of the stream wash over you, water slipping over rocks, leaves brushing together like silk sleeves. Someone nearby sneezes. Another unrolls a rice ball with loud paper crackle. The patrol is safe for now. You've got 10 minutes. No blankets, no mats, no bedtime tea. Just iron, dust, breath. It's not glamorous, but it's enough. And somehow, it's deeply human. One of your comrades shifts beside you, muttering a half-coherent dream fragment. Something about a merchant's daughter and a fish. You don't ask. You just smile a little, eyes still closed, mind still floating somewhere between armor plates and morning light. It's funny, in this life, you don't get many luxuries. But the act of pausing, of letting yourself go weightless for a few moments, even wrapped in 30 pounds of clanking, creaking metal, that's its own kind of luxury. And when the captain calls again softly, respectfully, you rise with the others, more alert than before. You cinch your armor straps. You mount your horse. You ride on ... Later that day, you return to camp. Your legs are stiff, your thighs aching from the long ride. Dust clings to every seam of your armor, and the place where your helmet strap rests under your chin is raw from sweat and friction. You dismount slowly, stretch once, then twice, and walk with the awkward gait of someone whose bones have been rearranged by a saddle. Still, you're grateful, because the camp is quiet. No alarms, no shouted orders, no blood, which means blood can rest. The sun hangs low now, golden behind a fringe of pine trees. The tents ripple in the breeze like sleeping sails. You glance toward your commander's tent and see the guards relaxed, chatting quietly, one of them snacking on roasted chestnuts. That's a good sign. No tension, no movement, no reason not to exhale. You head to your usual spot. It's not marked, but you know it beside the storage shed, where the ground is dry and the wall blocks the wind. It's not glamorous, but it's yours. You've napped there enough times that the dirt has a slight dip in your shape, a shallow grave of rest. You lower yourself carefully. You don't remove the armor, not all of it, maybe just the thigh guards. Loosen the shoulder ties a bit. Unbuckle your neck guard so you can lean your head back without slicing your ear. It's a small ritual now, a practiced choreography that takes less than a minute. Historians still debate how often samurai truly removed their armor during downtime. Some sources claim that even in moments of safety, full removal was rare, too time-consuming, too risky if an ambush came. Others point to scrolls and paintings showing warriors bathing, relaxing, even playing music in simple robes. But those images usually come from castles, not campaign roads. Out here, the armor stays on. It might loosen, it might shift, but it never really leaves. There's an old saying among the veterans, better to wake stiff than not at all. You've always liked that one, and tonight's stiffness is guaranteed. You fold your hands over your stomach. Your helmet's still on, but you've tilted it just enough to feel the air against your face. The breath you release is long, measured. You're not just tired, you're trained to recognize this kind of tired, the kind that reaches under your ribs, into your eyes, and settles behind your knees. A nearby group is playing a quiet game of Go, the wooden stones making soft clicks on the board. Further off, someone sings a lullaby in a language you don't recognize. A few of the older men hum along, out of tune but deeply content. These are the sounds of a resting camp. No shouting, no clanging, just murmurs and fire crackle. You lean your head back, the edge of your helmet pressing into the shed wall. The sky is turning, that hazy blue that comes before stars. The kind of blue that makes you forget battles exist. And you let yourself drift. You don't fall asleep all at once. Few samurai do. It's more like lowering a sail. The tension in your jaw loosens. Your shoulders settle. Your thoughts grow quieter, less shaped. You start thinking about rice just. Rice, the way it smells, the way it sticks to your fingers. Nothing important. That's the trick, really. To sleep in armor, you can't think about war. You can't think about whether you'll be ambushed or whether your commander has made the right decision. You can't think about the arrows in your quiver or the bruise on your hip. You have to think of small, boring things. Rice, your mother's garden, the way the bamboo creaked in the wind behind your childhood home. That's how you let go. One petal at a time. You once knew a man who claimed he could fall asleep in under a minute, anywhere, anytime, even during thunderstorms. His trick, he imagined a river, and in that river, a boat. He put all his thoughts in the boat, one by one, and pushed it downstream. Once the boat was gone, he slept. You tried it. It works about half the time. But right now, you don't need a boat. You just need this, the wind, the quiet, and the weight of your own armor pressing you gently into the earth. It's like being cradled by a very strict parent. You shift slightly. The plates along your ribs dig in a little. It hurts, but in a known way. The kind of discomfort that doesn't wake you anymore. You've built your peace around it, and as your breath deepens, you think just briefly of the generations who came before, warriors who napped in rice fields and castle corridors, who tied their swords to their wrists and slept with one eye half open. You are not alone in this ritual. You are part of a long, clinking lineage of armored dreamers. The last thing you hear before sleep takes you is the snap of firewood and the soft hush of a whetstone on steel. You let go, and the armor holds you. Asterisk. You wake to lantern light and the low murmur of voices. Camp has shifted into evening mode, fires burning steady, rice cooking in iron pots. Men laughing just a little too loudly before a senior clears his throat and brings the mood back down to a simmer. You blink a few times. Your back is sore. Your neck feels like it's been folded by an origami master with malicious intent. But you slept, and that's what matters. It's strange how the body adjusts. A few months ago, the idea of sleeping in armor would have sounded ridiculous. Now, it's second nature. You've learned exactly how to turn your hips to avoid bruising your ribs, how to nestle your elbow against your side so the vambrace doesn't dig in, how to sleep with your sword cradled like a pillow. Not comfortable, exactly, but efficient. Tonight's routine begins. You move with the others, eating, cleaning, checking equipment. Your armor stays mostly on. You adjust a strap here, tighten a knot there. The lacquered plates catch the firelight and glint like beetle shells. One of the older men notices a fray in your shoulder cord and silently passes you a replacement. You nod in thanks. There's not much talking now. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone knows tomorrow might bring a storm of steel, or rain, or both. And yet, no one seems worried, just tired. The good kind of tired, the kind that comes after doing what needed to be done. You find your resting place against same corner, same dip in the dirt. This time you loosen the straps on your greaves and set your helmet beside you, careful to lay it face up. Bad luck otherwise, some say. Not that you're superstitious, except when you are. As you settle in, you catch a glimpse of the stars, finally visible now, clean and cold and infinite. You wonder how many samurai have looked up at them just like this, too tired to think, too armored to care. There's an old story about a night guard who used to name constellations after his fallen friends, not the official names his own. One cluster he called Shigeru's arrow, after the first man he lost in battle. Another, Takashi's laugh, made of stars that looked like crooked teeth. He'd tell those stories while everyone else pretended to sleep. And then one night, he didn't come back from patrol. Now, every time you look up, you try to find those stars. Historians still argue whether samurai found peace in the night, or whether it only reminded them of uncertainty. Some sources talk about quiet meditation under moonlight. Others suggest nightfall was the most anxious time of day, when you couldn't see your enemies, when dreams became too real, when armor couldn't protect your mind. But here's your truth. Night is when the body remembers itself. The silence, the darkness, the lack of orders, they give your senses space to return. You smell the pine smoke. You hear the slow scrape of someone carving wood nearby. You feel the weight of your own limbs, and all of it tells you, yes, you're still here. You curl slightly, finding the best balance between armor and earth. You could take more of it off, sure, but you know better. You know how quickly stillness can turn to alarm. So you sleep dressed, dignified, ready, and something about that makes you feel proud. Maybe it's absurd. Maybe it's just habit. But there's a quiet kind of honor in learning how to rest without giving in. To sleep on your terms, not in surrender, but in trust in your body, your training, your brothers beside you. Across the camp, someone starts to hum again. That same lullaby. You still don't know the words, but you recognize the tune. You close your eyes, the stars stay steady above, and the armor, creaking softly as you exhale, settles in around you like an old friend pulling up a blanket. Morning doesn't arrive all at once. It begins with a dampness in the air, a slow drip from the eaves of the supply tent, the rustling of someone trying to light a fire with stiff fingers and not enough kindling. Then the crows begin, first one, then three, then a dozen, squabbling. In the trees like soldiers bickering over rations. Your eyes open before the sun clears the hills. Not because you want to, but because your body knows it should. That, too, is a kind of training. Your back is sore, your neck stiff, and your right shoulder has a numb spot that won't thaw until lunch. But when you shift your weight and sit up in your armor, it's not with dread, it's with routine. You slept, maybe an hour, maybe 4. You can't be sure, but it was enough. Because when you lean forward to roll your shoulders, every joint answers, a little creaky, maybe, but nothing is broken. Around you, the camp stirs like a great beast. A cough, a sniff, the clatter of a dropped pot. Boots shuffle over packed dirt, and always the soft clinking of armor being adjusted, rebuckled, checked and rechecked. No one complains. You rise slowly, the way you've seen the older samurai do it, one fluid motion, no huffing, no cracking knees if you can help it. There's a quiet dignity to it, even half asleep. And everyone knows the unspoken rule: never let anyone see you struggle with your own armor. It's like seeing a cat fall off a fence funny for a second, but it breaks the illusion. You splash cold water on your face, straight from the bucket. It tastes faintly of metal and moss. You don't care. It clears your head, sharpens the edges of your thoughts. You inhale deeply through your nose, then exhale through your mouth. Slow and long. Another day begins. This morning's task is camp maintenance, not combat. Still, you don't take off your armor. You just loosen it a bit, let it breathe with you. You learn not to remove too much, only what you can replace in under a minute. The shin guards stay on. So does the chest plate. Only the helmet rests on a stump beside you, facing the fire. Historians note that this partial readiness was typical during long campaigns. Armor was modular by design. You could sleep in it, march in it, fight in it, and still remove. Just enough to keep your circulation intact. The trick was balance. Too much removed, and you risked exposure. Too little, and your limbs went numb before breakfast. One old technique involved loosening the waist cords while lying down to allow for deeper breathing, then tightening them again before standing. Otherwise, you risked dizzy spells. You learned that one the hard way. Asterisk.